Before we read this passage from Matthew 8 in the cover of your bulletin, I wanted to say just a couple of words. There are two guys in this passage. There's a similar passage, parallel passage in Luke that has three guys who were basically trying to make up excuses to not really follow Christ. In Luke, it's a lot more clearer than Matthew. But what I would like for us to do is try to associate with these two people and think about what are some excuses that we might make for not following Christ with our full heart. I know I have a tendency, it's a human tendency we all have, to make up excuses when we do something wrong, to justify ourselves. And these two guys were trying to justify themselves before Jesus, who called them to do something with their lives. So let's keep that in mind as we read the Word of God together from Matthew 8. When Jesus saw the crowd around him, he gave orders to cross to the other side of the lake. Then a teacher of the law came to him and said, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." Jesus replied, "Foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." Another disciple said to him, "Lord, first let me go and bury my father." But Jesus told him, "Follow me and let the dead bury their own dead." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. Have you ever thought you could get something for almost nothing? Sometimes we undervalue what is truly valuable. It happens all the time. This past week, we celebrated the 150th anniversary of the purchase of Alaska from Russia. Alaska was bought March 30th, 1867, for $7.2 million, which may sound like a lot of money, but it averages out to 2 cents an acre. That's how much Alaska was bought for. And 2 cents an acre is the same Alaska that fueled the gold rush just a few years later. The same Alaska that furnishes the oil pipeline to the main 48 states today. On May 24th, 1626, Peter Minuit bought the island of Manhattan for goods totaling $24. The whole island of Manhattan for $24. Ironically, Minuit thought he was getting a deal. It seems the historians are now saying the Indians who took the money from him didn't actually own the land anyway, which is a little bit ironic. And thus Wall Street began. The Homestead Act helped start Oklahoma. It allowed for anyone over 21 years of age who had not taken up arms against the United States to buy 160 acres of land for an $18 application fee. $18 for 100. Wouldn't you like to buy land for that price today? That same law was in effect until 1986 in Alaska. You could still buy 160 acres of land for $18. The story in Matthew 8 is a story of people who wanted to strike a deal with Jesus. Both the deal makers sound to me, and maybe to most of us, good to our ears. And that probably is a problem. They wanted to follow Jesus and follow him cheaply. They didn't want to be disciples. They wanted to be fans of Christ. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said regarding this passage, Christianity without discipleship is always Christianity without Christ. It is clear in this passage that they were willing to follow Christ and giving things up for him if it was convenient for him. And this is the problem with American Christianity and with America in many ways today, is that we are a culture of convenience, a culture that values comfort, that values pleasure more than just about anything else. And it shows in many different ways. Generally, the more we invest and sacrifice for something, the more valuable it is for us. The more effort, the more time we put into something, the more valuable it is for us. We see this in many different ways. The more time and money you spend on your home, the more valuable your home is to you. The more time and money you may spend on a boat, the more valuable that boat or a car or a bike or whatever it is that's valuable to you. The more you spend time on that, the more is valuable to you in your life. The more you spend time and money with your children, the more valuable your children are to you as well. But somehow when it comes to religion, we draw the line. But Jesus said, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. It's a call to invest in Jesus Christ. Jesus said also in Matthew, the previous chapter, seek first the kingdom of God. Seek first his kingdom. And then all these other things will be added to you. They all will fall into place. Jesus also said in Matthew, the first commandment is to love God. To love him. Love him with your whole heart and soul and mind and strength. Don't love him just a little bit of love for God. With all of you, pour yourself into him and do not hold back. And that's kind of what this passage in Matthew is about. You had some people that wanted just a little bit of Jesus. They wanted him to influence them and to maybe teach them a little bit, but they really didn't want to be all in for Jesus. The first guy said, I'll follow you anywhere. And Jesus basically looked at the guy and said, you don't know what you're saying because I don't have a place to go. He said, foxes have holes, birds of the air have nests. I don't even have a place to stay at night. Jesus was basically saying, will you follow me, even if you don't know where I'm going to lead you? And that's the question that each of us has to answer. Will you follow Jesus, even if you don't know exactly where he's going with your life? Are you willing to trust him and to go there too and value his direction? The father of our faith, the one who teaches us to have faith, is a guy named Abraham. And Abraham, it says of him in Hebrews 11, describing the very first act of faith that he had. It says, by faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land, like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, for he was looking forward to a city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. Jesus did have a home, but his home was not in this earth. And he started out that way too. You know where Jesus was born? In a stable that wasn't even his, in a manger that he borrowed. And then not long after that, he had to leave that place to go to Egypt in fear for his life, his mother and father taking him with them to Egypt. And then he went back to the back country, kind of hiding out in a small town named Nazareth. And then when he came out, he was a homeless teacher throughout the land. But he did this to point people to their true home. And we all have a true home, and it is not in this life. Our comfort, our security, our true investment is not here. Invest in eternity. Invest in the place that will last forever. Not in what will be taken away with rust and with time. Jesus did not have a schedule. You know, he didn't have a schedule except for one thing. The only thing we know Jesus had a schedule for was going to Jerusalem to die during the Passover. Everything else seemed to be unscheduled. He spent his last night praying in an olive garden while his disciples slept underneath the stars. He didn't make reservations throughout Judea and Galilee. He was historically late when people wanted him to hurry up and help him. And even that happens to us today. Jesus comes to us sometimes not in the timing we want. And we say, "Where were you, Jesus? Why didn't you come sooner?" Those are the very words Mary asked him when Lazarus died. He didn't have a meal plan set up when 5,000 people followed him to the other side of the lake. He didn't set up a meal plan. He didn't say, "I've got a plan. Y'all come follow me." No, they got there and then they were hungry. But you know, when you follow Jesus, it's going to be okay. And so the 5,000 people were fed. And Jesus himself faced the cross, but the cross was not the end. If you trust in Jesus, he will see you through. This guy comes up to Jesus and says, "I'm going to follow you anywhere." And he said it in the midst of a large crowd. There was a large crowd on one side of the lake listening to Jesus. They were all gathered to hear him, to see him do miracles. You know what Jesus' response was to the large crowd? It wasn't exactly church growth tactics today. He left the large crowd and went to the other side of the lake. Wait a minute. Aren't you supposed to grow the church, Jesus? It's sometimes hard to follow Jesus. Sometimes it looks like he's going the other way. And you know what happened to the people who did follow Jesus to the other side of the lake? They followed him in boats. If you read a little bit further in Mathew 8, the very next thing that happened is they got on their boat to follow to the other side of the lake, and a huge storm came up. They didn't have the Weather Channel back then, so they didn't know. They didn't see the small craft advisory. A huge storm came up. And you know what? They were afraid for their lives, and Jesus spoke, and the winds died down, and the seas calmed down. And it's a lesson to us all, a lesson to all of us, that when you follow Jesus, there may be storms. There will be problems. But if you follow Jesus, he will see you through those storms. The guy said, "I'll follow you anywhere." But he didn't know what he was saying. He didn't know where he was going. And Jesus saw his insincerity in that. Peter said the same thing. Jesus said, "All of you are going to fall away. All of you are going to run away." And Peter said, "Lord, I will never fall away." And Jesus looked at Peter and said, "Before the cock crows, before the rooster crows, you're going to disown me 3 different times." And he did. Now, Peter had good intentions, and so did this guy. He had good intentions. "I'm going to follow you. And we can have good intentions in following Christ. But our intentions show when the rubber meets the road, when the storms come, when the problems come in life. Do we give up? When it's inconvenient to follow Christ, when he goes to the other side of the lake, do we give up or do we follow him? We like to follow Christ when it's convenient for us. The second guy wanted to follow Christ by putting him off. The other guy said, "Well, let me bury my father." Well, it's clear from the Greek that his father was not dead. It's not like his father had died and he was going to the funeral. "Just wait just a minute, Jesus, and I'll go to the funeral. I'll be right with you." His father hadn't died. In the Jewish culture, when your relative dies, you buried them that day. And it is clear that the guy wasn't saying, "Just wait a minute, Jesus, and I'll follow you." Instead, he was saying, "Wait a few years till my father dies and his estate is finished, and then I have money from his estate, and then I can afford to follow you." That's what's really going on here. I hear it sometimes, "Okay, I'll follow Jesus, but let me wait till the right circumstance. Let me wait till my ship comes in, and then I will give. Or let me wait till I win the lottery. Or let me wait till my estate's settled, and then I'll be the kind of guy that I need to be." Jesus' reply was to let the spiritually dead bury the dead. The problem was, it wasn't just an ordinary teacher asking this guy to follow him. It was Jesus. I mean, Jesus was looking him in the face and saying, "Follow me." And the guy was making up excuses and using his family as an excuse. People use their family as an excuse all the time. I hear it a lot. I hear some people say, "Well, I'm young. I don't have a family yet. And I've got things to do and places to go. And after I get settled down and have kids, maybe then I'll go to church and follow Jesus." And then I hear some people say, "Well, I just got married and we don't have kids yet. And we got to do this and that and the other on the weekends. And Sunday's my only day off. It's my day. And I can't really give that day to God." And then I hear people with children say, "Well, our children are so little. I don't have any sleep. If I came to church, I'd just sleep right through the sermon. It wouldn't do me any good." And then I hear people whose children are a little bit older say, "Well, my children, they have these things to do on the weekend. They have soccer, they have tennis, they have baseball, they have cheerleading, they have dance, they have football, whatever it is. After they grow up a little bit and they quit going to these weekend things, then I'll get my ducks in a row and then I'll come to church." It's just like this guy saying, "Lord, I'll follow you, but let me go bury my father in a few years and get the estate settled." Jesus wants people who are willing to say, "You are God. You are God. And therefore, I'm going to make you a priority in my life. I'm going to quit fooling around with my life, quit playing games. I'm going to make you first. I'll follow you, Lord, wherever you go and whenever you want me. My time is yours, my life is yours, because you are my Lord and you are my God." But oftentimes I've done the same thing. We all do it. We all need God's grace to kind of reel us back in from making up these excuses and just living by our own comfort zone, our own pleasure, our own convenience. We are a culture that really, really values our own pleasure and our own comfort and our own convenience. And that's what these two guys were valuing when they talked to Jesus. So Esau valued his stew more than he valued his godly inheritance. And people do the same thing all today. We are a culture that overvalues the immediate. We want to have fast food. We want to have microwaves. We want to have faster washers and dryers. We want to have our replies answered to us quickly by text message. Emails are too slow. And if you don't answer my text right away, what's wrong with you? We want instant discipleship, instant blessing, instant convenience. The most radical way that our setting up convenience and comfort and pleasure as our guide shows, the most radical way that's a symptom of the broader culture is our epidemic of drug use and our epidemic of sexual immorality. I want my pleasure, and I want it now, and I want it the way I want it. In the last 17 years, addiction to opioids is up 400%. 400% since 2000. When President Trump was running for his election, he pointed out one of the great problems in America today is addiction to heroin. And let me tell you, it's right here in Chapin. And it's right here in Irmo. It's not just in New Hampshire or Portugal. Drug overdose is now the leading cause of accidental death in the U.S. Can we ignore that? And it's just a symptom of a greater problem. Is we value comfort and pleasure and convenience. What are drugs anyway? Drugs are just dopamine giving our brain pleasure. comfort, where we just don't worry about anything. We don't feel any pain. 94% of heroin addicts started off with prescription drugs for some pain that they had. And they want to continue that pain relief, that comfort. We value comfort. This past week at University of South Carolina, we heard about the women's basketball games, which is great. Congratulations to all the Gamecock fans out there. And the men's basketball team, which did amazingly well. But did you hear about the USC student who died from drug overdose this past week? I didn't. I didn't see it in the paper. Our kids are losing their lives because they value comfort and pleasure and convenience more than they value what's really important. We have taught them. We've taught them in the way we have faith. Oh, you don't feel like coming to church? It's okay. It's not convenient for you? It's okay. We have to teach our children discipline. We have to teach them to say no. We have to teach them self-control. We have to teach them value. I failed in that. We all need to grow in our ability to call God, God, and our ability to follow Him whenever and wherever, and to teach our children and our youth the same thing. Amen.